So, are you storing water as part of your long term food storage pantry? Obviously, food is important, but water, as you know, is even more important. You can last several weeks without food, but you can only last a couple of days without water. And so, it's very critical that you have some source of water for emergency situations. And if you're storing it, the question is, are you doing it correctly? If you're not, there's a potential for it to be dangerous. So, let's talk about that.
If you had zero bacteria, no bacteria, and a packaging that can last hundreds of years, how long will this last on a shelf? Indefinite. Okay. We are the only company that has actually done testing to see how long it can last. And our resellers asked us to stop at 20 years because they want to be able to resell it every 20 years again. But the reality is, if the packaging doesn't fail, no bacteria, how long is it going to last? Indefinite. Does that make sense?
Well, hey everybody, I'm Bill from Live Simple, Live Free, and I want to talk today about water storage, something that's very important for your long-term prepping, and something that it's important that it's done right. Now, this is something that I'm just really beginning to learn about in my journey. There are many in my prepper journey. There are many different ways to secure a water source. You can catch it from the rain, those big cans, big 50-gallon or whatever barrels. You can filter it from a stream, which was the way that we've been planning on doing it. You can also buy it, bottles of water like this, and there's a lot to know about all of that. And so I want to tell you about a class that Thrivalist is going to be having. It's a live Zoom training, and it's going to cover all aspects of water storage. So here's what you'll learn if you attend this class. Why a few cases of water is not a real plan. Exactly how much water your family actually needs. How to build a layered water system, short, mid, and long term. The right way to store water and what to avoid. Simple, effective filtration and purification methods. The biggest mistakes families make and how to avoid them. Now, this is called the Emergency Water Masterclass, and like I said, it's a Zoom call which you can attend, and it's free of charge, but you do have to register in order to get the link to join it. And that will be on April 14th, 2026, next week, April 14th. It'll be at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. And you're welcome to come. We'd love to have you to learn all about water storage. Please register if you're going to do that, and the links are down below to be able to register for it. You can also attend it in person if you are in the Salt Lake City area and meet some of the people there, some of the great people at Thrivalist. That would be great. Now, many people are not in a situation where they can collect water or store water, get water from a stream or anything like that. The only option is to buy water for storage. So I want to take the rest of this video to talk about water that you would buy for storage. Most people that do it would just buy a bottle of water like this. Now, this is called Smart Water. I'm not picking on this brand, okay? I just went and picked one off of the shelf at the store. There are numerous issues with this kind of water. Depending on the type of bottle it's in, you could get chemicals leaking into the water. The water can actually evaporate, believe it or not, through the porous container over a period of time. And so it's important that you have the correct type of storage container for it. The other issue is bacteria. There's always bacteria in the water. If you get water from your sink, there's bacteria in it. Every bottle of water that you buy like this is going to have bacteria in it. And that can make it go bad or go sour or even go dangerous over a long period of storage. If you're going to have this just for a couple months, that's no big deal. But if you're going to store it for a couple years, that's a big issue. So that's the two main things that we really want to talk about here is the type of container and how do you eliminate the bacteria. Now, Thrivalist has a product called PuraV right here, which is there you go. It's actually the the purest prepackaged storage water that you could buy in the emergency prepper market, and we'll be talking more about this. And the owner of Thrivalist is a man named Marcelo Sergopoulos. That's quite a name, huh? Sergopoulos. But Marcelo is an expert in this, and he spent several years researching how to do this properly. And so he's going to be coming on in just a minute and talking all about aspects, doing a deep dive into all types of things that I didn't even know about how to store water this way. I found it to be fascinating. So, but before we do that, I want to take just a second to tell you about Thrivalist's monthly special this month. They have a pretty amazing special. They were going to be having a full-blown spring sale this month, but to be honest with you, last month, the month of March, the sales were so huge and they sold more than they ever expected they would, that they don't have enough inventory to do a huge sale this month like they were planning. But they are doing a monthly special with up to 50% off or even 60% off, and that's really amazing. For the monthly specials this month, it's family cans, the larger ones, and they have, if you buy the individual cans, that's 45% off, and they have organic pineapple, they have peach dices, they have buttered powder, and non-GMO cornmeal. And like I said, if you buy them individually, they're 45% off, and of course, if you join the Subscribe and Save, monthly Subscribe and Save, you get an additional 10% off, so it's 55% off. Now, they've put all of those together in a bundle, and that bundle has one pineapple, one peaches, one butter powder, and 2 cornmeal cans. And if you buy it in the bundle like that, it's 50% off, plus the 10% if you join the Subscribe and Save, so you're going to be getting 60% off. Now, that's really amazing. That's good for the entire month of April, while supplies last. If they sell out, then they won't be available anymore, or they might have to substitute something else into the bundle. But it's a great sale. I just wanted to tell you about it. And of course, the links are all down below for the website for all of that. Now, let's get into the training by Marcelo about the bottled water storage.
So we get to talk about Purivine. I'm super excited about this because it took me a long time to figure out how to do emergency water. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you the story of how kind of it started and how I made a bunch of mistakes and until I learned how to do water right. If you were to go back about 15 years ago, I had a domain called cannedwater.com. I mean, huge, amazing, cool domain. And I've since let that go just because it just didn't make sense to continue with it. But if you were to go back that long ago, we were selling canned water. This is what it looked like, 30-year shelf life canned water. And this was the best thing in the industry at the time. Nobody had anything better. And I'll tell you where this all started with the canned water. If you were to go back to 1942, I believe, 1942, 1943, there was a war happening called World War II. Anybody ever heard of that, right? And they're trying to figure out, how do we stimulate the economy? How do we create things for our soldiers? How do we go into production to do the best we can do to support the Army, the Air Force, the military out there that are saving our lives? And somebody came up with an idea for canned water. This is actually one of the cans. I actually got it. There's water in here. Okay. And what happened is people were trying to figure out, how do we duplicate what they did back in 1942? Because this can right here actually has water in it you can drink, and you can survive with this water. Now, let me tell you about it. You have an edge here that was sanded down, but it's soldered. You can see a soldered edge right here. You have a seam that is just you can't destruct this seam. It's just amazing. This right here, can anybody remember going back before aluminum cans, before we ended up getting these aluminum cans back in the day, right? Do you remember the cans we used to have as kids? Some of you can remember, some of you are too young, right? But can you remember those cans were just so strong and hard, and they had the pull top, and you had to be careful not to cut yourself when you pulled that? Do you remember that? And that thing just was so strong. That's what we used to have. We used to have tin cans or zinc cans that did not rust. That's what they built this out of. And it's indestructible. I mean, I can't dent this thing. It's really hard to dent. So when they ended up doing this, they not only coated it on the outside with an amazing paint. Okay, they not only soldered it, they not only put a bottom piece on here that's made out of a strong metal that doesn't undo very easily, but they put the water in there and then they retorted it, they cooked it. They ended up making it so that everything inside here was pressure cooked. So everything died in there, but they also put a chemical in there to make sure that the chemical also killed everything as well. They did everything they could to make sure that there was no bacteria in this water. Because if you have a container that holds the test of time and you have no bacteria inside there, how long will this last? Indefinite, right? It just keeps going and going and going and going. So what happened is we ended up doing the same thing with metal that rusts on the inside. You can see a little bit of rust inside here. And we ended up putting it inside a metal can. We ended up pressure cooking it and everything else. Now, the problem is it's not going to be as thick as this can, okay? It's also not going to be as strong as this can because it's too wide, a lot thinner. Wider, okay, crushes better than thinner. So we had to add little ribs to it, okay? Little ribs to make it last a little bit longer and make it a little stronger. But even with all of this protection, there was residual oxygen in the inside when it was packaged. And you can shake this thing and you can feel a suction in there. You can feel it. You can shake this thing and feel a suction, okay, because it was pressure cooked in there and sealed. And what happened is two problems. There's residual oxygen. It starts rusting from the inside out, okay? And second of all, when you will go from one pressure to another atmospheric pressure, when you had other cans of this, water is heavy, the cans would start crushing and you'd have a lot of problems with crushing because of different atmospheric pressures. So what happened is I didn't learn all this completely just on my own. We knew some of the problems here, but it wasn't until I was working with some investors that were about to put $400,000 to $700,000 into canning equipment for us to just start canning like crazy and create this thing on a mass scale. We didn't learn about that until they were about to put the money in. We were about to give part of our company away, and I started doing some due diligence. And I went deep into the due diligence, and I started calling all the biggest can manufacturers like Crown and Ball and all these big ones around the world. And I asked, can I talk to your chief scientists? And they said, sure, let's get you on the chief scientist. And the chief scientists ended up saying, hey, Marcel, there's no way you can duplicate this. Okay. The only way you can duplicate it is if we went back to zinc or tin that doesn't rust for you to do it right, because these cans will either rust from the outside in and break the seal or from the inside out and break the seal. And you'll probably have some breakage around year 10 of some of the cans. Some of them might last longer. Some of them might fail by year 10. So I said, well, then what about going to something like this? You know, here's a company claiming 50-year shelf life and 100-year shelf life on some of these cans out there, and they're putting it in aluminum cans that doesn't rust. Can we do something like that? And they laughed. And they said, we make those all day long. That's what we do. And we have an 18-month shelf life claim on those, because the big companies out there, one starts with a C, one starts with a P, okay, have done a really good job of making this the cheapest packaging in the industry to save money. Okay? So all the sodas and everything are put in the cheapest packaging. And what happens with that is you end up putting it in, for example, I've gone to eBay, for example, and you go find 15, 20-year-old cans of soda and put in never opened. And I've found several pictures. You got to search for them. But I've found several pictures, never opened, completely empty. And there's a couple reasons for that. One reason is if you put acid in there, like a lot of the sodas we're drinking, it'll eat through the edge of it and create micro holes, and it'll actually evaporate out over time. The other reason it happens, for example, with water, which doesn't have the acids that the soda cans have. One of the other reasons is that this seam up here is so thin and so weak because it's not tin, it's not even steel, it's not zinc or anything like that. It's a thin aluminum, okay? And the only way to keep this thin can from damaging and falling apart is to put gas in it. Because without gas, you take it from one atmospheric pressure to another, it crushes. And so you have to have either carbon monoxide, or you have to have some type of nitrogen, something pushing the gas from the inside to the outside to keep it cylindrical. So now it's strong. Now it'll work. But the gas becomes a weakness at that point because all it takes is for this seam not to be done right and the gases start escaping out of it. All it takes for you to stick it in a warm garage and then a cold garage and then a warm garage a couple times for this seam to loosen up. And then all of a sudden it evaporates. Now I've got a couple cans here that I've held onto, and it's interesting. I don't want to show you the name of the company, but if you shake it, it's about that empty right now, and it's completely hard. Okay, the gases are in there, but it's only about that or that full right now, about half empty, and never opened. Okay, you can look at it, never opened. So to be able to claim 50-year shelf life on that type of packaging doesn't work. It doesn't work for 100 years, especially, but 50 years, 20 years, it just doesn't work. So the big problem we had is how do we find a packaging that's going to be able to work for as long as we want it to work, right? And how do we make it so it's strong enough, right? It's durable enough to be able to last. So the aluminum cans didn't work. We told that company we're not going to do it. The pouched water doesn't work, okay? Because if you work with any of the emergency kit suppliers that I supply to, because we work with very, very large organizations with the emergency water, the Purify. We're talking like FEMA, some of the largest corporations in the world, companies like the state of, or states, like government institutions like the state of Texas and Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and a whole bunch of others. We have to make sure everything works right, okay? So when you're looking at this, these things right here puncture so easily that a lot of people's emergency kits, when they're moving around or whatever, end up leaking all over the place. These, if you've ever dropped an aluminum can on the floor, it goes psst, and empties out really quick. It's not durable. So we're trying to figure, okay, well, we're not going to do cans anymore, so forget the investor right now. How are we going to do this? And then we spent probably the next 6 months trying to figure it out. And we ended up looking at glass. Glass doesn't work because it breaks during emergencies. And we're not going to be able to get zinc or tin because it's too inconsistent these days. Way too expensive. Each can would cost like 20 to 30 bucks by the end of, if we tried to duplicate what they did back in the World War II, we just can't do it. So all of a sudden we figured out that HDPE plastic, the safest plastic in the world, the most food grade safe plastic in the world, that you've been buying your gallons of milk with for the last 20, 30, 40 years, okay? This right here is the best thing to put it in because it's durable, okay? It's puncture resistant, it's crush resistant, it doesn't rust, there's no rot or mildew that can grow on it, it's flood safe. You can have chemicals, so plastics are porous, but HDPE is more strong, especially high density polyethylene number 2 plastic is more dense towards chemicals than even PET, which is the stuff you should never drink, okay? Because this right here is very rigid, okay? It breaks apart easily. It creates a lot of microplastics in it, and it becomes very dangerous to your hormones, to your life, to everything else. So all these people drinking, all this all the day, which I'm guilty of every now and then, right? When I'm really thirsty, this stuff can be dangerous. The clear plastic stuff, PET, number 1 plastic, PET or PETE, okay? So HDPE is a lot safer for a lot of reasons. And by the way, one other cool thing about Purify is you drop it in the water, and guess what happens? It floats. So during an emergency, you can get to it really, really easy. Now, the next thing we're trying to figure out is, okay, we got the good packaging. We also need to make sure that it has an airtight seal. So you'll notice that cans have a seam on the bottom and a seam on the top. This has no seam on the bottom, but there is a hole at the top and it's smaller. And then what we do is we do a triple protection. We do an induction seam, which is if you've ever seen you go to a peanut butter and you have that silver lining on it that you have to take a knife to and break it off, right? That's called an induction seam. It actually becomes a welded on seam. It's not glue. It actually is welded onto the bottle, so it becomes 100% part of the bottle. So now we have no seams because that metal piece, that plastic metal seam gets melted onto the top underneath this lid, just like that peanut butter jar. Okay, then we put a lid on it. That's protection number two, and then we put a shrink wrapped plastic around that, protection number three. So you know that it's a tamper-proof seal, that if it's been broken, you know something's wrong. Probably shouldn't drink the water if anything else is wrong. So with that in mind, we created an airtight seal, induction seal, triple sealed, tamper-proof, bacteria protected, so bacteria can't get in, mouth protected, because now all of a sudden these cans, okay, the cans, the pouches, if you were in an emergency and all this air got in it, all this contamination got on it, guess where you're drinking from? Where the contamination is. But we ended up taking this and putting a lid on it. So where does the contamination get? On the lid. You take the lid off, you can drink underneath it, and now it's a lot safer on your lips. You're not getting a whole bunch of contamination into your body during a really bad emergency. Chemicals, things in the air, whatever it is. So now it's mouth protected, clean drinking, long term, safe. Okay. And then you also have a little bit different. You have a cap on the top. So this right here, this plastic, this HDPE plastic, is the exact same plastic that the military uses for their canteens. So now you have a reusable canteen during an emergency. And you can refill it, put the plastic or the lid back on, refill it, put the lid back on, drink it up, refill it, put the lid back on, and it's canteen ready. And you can throw it back in your backpack because it's so tough. It's not going to get, it's not going to break, puncture, and everything else like all the other things out there, like cans and pouches and everything else. That's how tough it is. The other thing is, when you look at this, this is not a day's worth of water. This is not a day's worth of water. You're opening a bunch of little things to be able to take a little bit. Right here, because you can reclose it, you have a day's worth of water. It's a liter worth of water. So FEMA wanted a liter worth of water because if you had to ration things out, 1 liter is the minimum you should be drinking once a day or all day. So we have in a liter size, easy to transport, not in a bunch of smaller amounts. And then we put it in a box that you can stack and everything else if you needed to do a whole bunch of them. We have very rich people come in, a lot of money, and they buy pallets of this stuff for themselves. We have organizations buying a ton of pallets because they can hand it out. And then we have people who don't have very much money who buy just a couple boxes or a box of this to be able to put in their 72-hour kits in their car and everything else. Now, heat is not going to ruin it, okay? You're going to get a canteen taste just like you do with a canteen, but freezing could ruin it. So you got to be careful because if you have it sideways where the water is on the top or under or like this and it freezes, it can break the induction seam underneath. So just be careful with freezing. People say, well, I live in a place that freezes. What I say is during the freezing months, okay, just go get yourself a small, what's called, not a thermos, but a cooler, like one of those styrofoam coolers. Stick your water and a couple electronics, your batteries, whatever else you have in your car. Stick it in there during those months. Or if you're afraid of it getting too hot and you want the canteen taste, do the same thing during those months, and you'll preserve your water. Again, people go, "Oh, that's too much work," but then again, during an emergency, what's the most important thing, right? Especially a long-term emergency, water. And you can clean wounds with water, right? You can hydrate yourself with water. You can cook with water. There's so many things, hygiene, sanitation, everything requires water. If you were to go back to Haiti, if you were to go back to Indonesia, what happened in Indonesia, if you were to go to Hurricane Sandy, if you were to go to Hurricane, any of the big hurricanes, all of them had problems with water. Why do you think people ran during COVID to go get water, bottles of water out of Costco and other places when the water was obviously not going to shut off because of pandemic at home? Didn't make any sense. but because water typically in sudden emergencies is the thing you need the most. And so we've done everything we can on the packaging to make it the right thing. Now, HDPE, by the way, is BPA free. You don't have the chemicals to start out with. It is recyclable, 100% recyclable. And the cool thing about it is not only does it reduce waste, I don't know if you ever go on YouTube and see what people do with HDPE that you cannot do with other plastics. You can take HDPE, you can heat it up in a pan or in an oven, and it melts completely. And people make tools out of it. They make hammers, they make wheels, they make all these different things out of this plastic, which can be used over and over and over and over during an emergency. Melt it, create something new. Melt it, create something new. And it's just an awesome plastic to have during an emergency to be able to create any tools that might break or you don't have during an emergency, whatever it is. Make sense? Okay. So the last thing is it's great to have the right packaging, but there's one big, gigantic problem, and that's called bacteria. And bacteria is really difficult to get out of water. Every water out there has bacteria. Your water from the store has bacteria. Your water from the sink has bacteria, even though it's been treated. The hardest one to get out is called heterotrophic bacteria. Now, if you have a little bit of bacteria, what happens? It can grow over time and become billions of bacteria. Bacterium, I guess, billions of bacterium single. It becomes bacteria, lots of bacteria, right? Okay. So what happens is, how do you get that bacteria out? Because if you can get the bacteria out and you have a packaging that literally can last, this right here literally can last hundreds of years on a shelf. Okay. It doesn't rust from the inside out. It doesn't have the pressure of gas on the inside pushing out that makes it a weak point. Because there's no gas in there and the packaging is right, it can last hundreds of years. Okay. When you have a packaging that is perfect and everything else, the big problem is what you put on the inside. If you had zero bacteria, no bacteria, and a packaging that can last hundreds of years, how long will this last on a shelf? Indefinite. Okay. We are the only company that has actually done testing to see how long it can last. And our resellers asked us to stop at 20 years because they want to be able to resell it every 20 years again. But the reality is, if the packaging doesn't fail, no bacteria, how long is it going to last? Indefinite. Does that make sense? So we made the best emergency water in the world, is what it is. We took about 6 months and failed trying to figure out how to get that bacteria out because it's really hard to get out. We tried silver. Okay, everybody said, "Oh, just use ionized silver. Use this solution, this and that. Use ozone. Do UV. Do all these different things." And we still had bacteria, and we kept failing. We're like, "How in the world are we going to do this?" And then I was working with a water expert in Florida, and he and I were on a phone call. And I'm like, "Man, we've spent so much money and we keep failing. How are we going to do this?" And he said, "Have you tried this process before?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, let me try that." And so we tried and tweaked and figured out the process and everything like that. And then we sent it in to get tested and it came back zero. And we're like, "Oh, we did it. We have no bacteria and a packaging that works." And then, so that's where Purify started. And until this day, we're the best water in the world. We're the best prepackaged emergency water in the world. And so that kind of gives you a feel. What that gives you is it gives you a system that you can use during an emergency is to be able to get the water you need during an emergency. And it gives you the confidence you need that you have reliable storage, that you have something ready for emergencies. And most of all, you have peace of mind that you can protect yourself and, more importantly, those you love, so you don't feel like, "Man, I messed up. When the time comes, when the emergency happens, I should have done that." You don't have to have should haves. Okay. You don't have to feel vulnerable like a lot of people feel. You're just ready for emergencies because you prepared the right way the first time. Does that make sense? Quickly and effectively. Yeah. And I'll share one more thing that I probably should have mentioned. This right here, do you notice I bought this water? Do you see how it's bent? Okay. I didn't do anything different here. I just put it in my house, but over time it's bending and it's having problems. It's going to evaporate eventually. And what's crazy is these become dangerous to the point where you shouldn't keep it over 6 months to a year. You should be rotating these. Now, there's reasons to use some of these bottles. There's good reasons to let the sunlight in and use the SOTUS method and everything else. But in all reality, a lot of the reasons why FEMA and others trust us because we did it right, but also the reason they keep buying, these organizations buy from us, is because over time, especially with inflation, it gets expensive to replace this every 6 to 12 months. Where you can put this, 20 years from now with the inflation and everything else, you're saving a ton of money and you're saving a ton of hassle because you don't have to remember, oh, when do I have to replace that? Oh, when do I have to rotate it? Like you just mentioned, Jason. It just makes it really easy. It's a no-brainer at that point. Just leave it there.
Points. One question that came in was how many gallons should everyone drink of water per day?
So, I would say at least 1 liter, like I talked about, but it depends on the situation. If you're pregnant, health issues, you work out a lot, it's very hot where you're at, or very cold where you're at, which, by the way, cold is worse at dehydrating than heat. Did you know that? And so if you're in those type of situations, I would always shoot for about 2 liters at least per day. Does that make sense for drinking? And if you wanted to get up to 2, 3, 4 liters, you're never gonna get upset at yourself that you had more water and food during an emergency than you needed. You're gonna get upset if you didn't have enough. But if you have more than you need, believe me, somebody's gonna use it if you really want to get rid of it. And so I would say if you get more, that's awesome because there's a difference between large storage tanks, and I'm going to be speaking on the 14th. I'll be speaking at the store on water, and I'll go into how to store big amounts of water. Okay. And that you don't even have to do anything with it. You can bathe with it and everything else. You can sanitize counters with it. But when it comes to water, you want to make sure you protect for drinking and open wounds, especially. You just want to make sure you have the right water or you're able to filter it down on the spot right.
Wow, thank you, Marcelo. I hope you found that as interesting, as fascinating as I did. I've been a prepper for many years, and I just learned a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't have any idea. So thank you, Marcelo. So if you want to learn more about water storage, then be sure to check out the class next week and check the links below. Also, the link below for the Thrivalist website where you can buy Pura-V water, drinking water. If you have water that you're storing and you're not completely sure that it's how pure it is, you can still use it for cooking because the cooking is going to kill anything that's in there. You can still use it for washing. You can still use it for flushing your toilet, that sort of thing. But for drinking water, you want the purest water you can get, and that's Pura-V. So check it out, and at least consider getting enough water for a week or something like that in case the storm goes and knocks the water out. And so check out the website. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this information very helpful. Live simple, live free, you be blessed. We'll see you next time.